Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. When a spouse works in the law, people assume the paperwork tells the whole truth. It does not in this story. The red flag was not only the betrayal, it was a performance of it. Anybody who needs an audience for a private wound is usually trying to control the story before the facts show up. If someone chooses humiliation over honesty, do not answer with a scene. Answer with records, dates, and a calm voice. The man who served me divorce papers had a neat haircut, polished shoes, and the apologetic face of somebody delivering flowers to the wrong funeral. He found me on the maintenance floor of our bus terminal on Detroit's east side, right as my crew was finishing the noon safety huddle. Diesel hung in the air. Somebody had a small radio playing Old Anita Baker Near Bay 3. My clipboard was warm from my hand. He said, "Marcus Holloway?" And when I said yes, he pulled out the envelope. Across the floor, 3 mechanics stopped talking without meaning to. I knew before he said another word that Alana had chosen the place on purpose. Not home, not her office, not the coffee shop in Midtown where she liked to stage difficult conversations behind beautiful ceramic cups. Work, in front of men who called me M. Hall and asked me for overtime approvals and advice about teenage sons. She wanted me reduced in public, made smaller than my own name. The courier said, "You've been served," in a voice so low it almost sounded respectful. I took the packet, slid my thumb under the seal, then reached into my own messenger bag. Before this gets any deeper, if you have ever seen someone try to weaponize lies, paperwork, or public embarrassment to control the story, tap like right now. Share this with somebody who needs a reminder that quiet evidence beats loud manipulation every time, and subscribe for more original relationship drama stories with real consequences. "And this is for Ms. Holloway," I said, handing him a thick blue folder with a yellow sticky note clipped to front. Her name was written in my block print, the kind I learned from technical diagrams and years of filling out inspection logs nobody could misread. "Please make sure she gets it today. Not tomorrow. Today." The young man blinked at the weight of it. There were tabs sticking out from the side, bank records, school sign-in sheets, email printouts, an investigator's affidavit. The beginning of the end, packed in office supply plastic. My foreman, Reggie, looked at me the way men look at each other when they sense grief but do not want to embarrass it. "You good?" he asked. I nodded because I was standing and breathing, and there were 22 buses due out by 3. But my chest had that hollow, humming feeling like the minute after a tire blows on the freeway, and the car is still deciding whether it will listen to you. The courier glanced from me to the folder and back. "Should I sign something?" he asked. "No," I said. "She'll understand exactly what it is." My wife, Alana Holloway, was the kind of attorney judges remembered after one hearing. Not because she was loud. Alana never wasted volume. She was precise, elegant, and cold enough to make precision look moral. She wore narrow gold hoops, pressed suits in jewel tones, and carried a fountain pen she used even for grocery lists, as if milk and onions needed cross-examination. When we first married, I admired that. Later, I learned she used the same measured tone to ask whether I wanted more coffee, and to plan the clean removal of a man from his own life. We met at a repast, of all places, after my great-aunt Lella's funeral at New Hope Baptist on the west side. I was 31 and exhausted, carrying aluminum trays of baked chicken to the church basement, while my mother directed cousins like a battlefield captain. Alana was there with a co-worker whose uncle had known my family for years. She was not yet a partner then, just a young associate with a laugh that surprised me, because it came out warm and unguarded. She complimented my tie, then corrected the pastor's quote from Toni Morrison without sounding rude. I noticed both things. We built a life that looked solid from the curb, brick colonial in a quiet neighborhood near Grosse Pointe Park, not fancy enough to make us ridiculous, not modest enough to embarrass her colleagues. A daughter, Zora, born after a difficult pregnancy that left Alana more anxious than she ever admitted. Friday nights meant catfish from a carryout on Livernois and old vinyl on the turntable, usually Roberta Flack or Donny Hathaway, while I ironed shirts in the dining room because I never trusted dry cleaners with collars. On Sundays, I drove my mother to church and brought back peach cobbler and foil. I worked as fleet compliance manager for a regional transit contractor, the man who could tell by sound whether an alternator was about to go and by paperwork whether a driver had skipped a required inspection. I like systems. I like things that matched. My mother used to say my faith lived in labels and folders. She was not wrong. After she got evicted when I was 10 because a landlord misplaced 3 money orders, I grew up saving every receipt in envelopes with dates on them. Alana used to tease me for it. Then she married into it and benefited from it. The first crack was money, though it did not look dramatic at first. A transfer here, a transfer there. $7,000 to her sister's wellness startup in Southfield. For $1,000 to cover temporary office costs for a trial team. Then another $12, moved from our joint savings into an account I did not recognize. When I asked, she touched my wrist and said, "Marcus, you know how partnership works. Timing matters. I'll replace it before quarter's end." That answer should have satisfied me, because it was neat. Instead, it sat in me like a fishbone. Small, sharp, impossible to swallow. The second crack was our daughter's calendar. Zora was 9, serious about spelling words, terrified of bees, and devoted to making paper cities out of shoe boxes. I did pick up from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays because Alana's court schedule ran long. Then one Thursday, Zora said, "Daddy, why were you late 2 times this month?" Ms. Tasha wrote it down. I had not been late once. I checked the school app that evening and saw 2 notes entered under authorized contacts. Both said I had missed pickup. Both were false. Alana said the app was glitchy and changed the subject. I made my first bad decision right there. I let it go, not because I believed her, because my mother had just started dialysis, and I was tired of every hard thing landing in the same season. I told myself my marriage had bad weather. I told myself lawyers saw conflict everywhere, and sometimes brought that home by habit. I told myself a strong man did not become suspicious over a school app and a handful of transfers. The lie I told myself was elegant enough to pass for maturity. Really, it was fear dressed up in church clothes and asking to be called patience. Then Alana started rehearsing around me. That is the only way I can describe it. She would ask strange, pointed questions in that soft deposition voice. "Would you say your temper has gotten worse since your mother got sick? How many drinks did you have at Curtis's 40th? Do you think work stress makes you less present with Zora?" The first 2 times, I answered like a husband. By the 5th, I answered like a witness. She smiled each time as if nothing about it was unusual. I started hearing marriage in transcript format, every casual moment suddenly under oath. One Saturday in October, I came home from Belle Isle with Zora and found Alana's home office printer jammed, spitting out half a page. I was going to clear it and keep moving. That was my second decision point, and it could have gone another way. I could have respected the boundary and walked out. I could have remained a man she thought would rather preserve his self-image than protect himself. Instead, I read the top line. Petition for exclusive use and occupancy. My name was 3 lines down, described as volatile, unpredictable, and intermittently absent from parental responsibilities. I stood there with my daughter's jack in my hand and read enough to understand the architecture of what Alana was building. It was not only a divorce filing. It was a narrative. She alleged financial irresponsibility, emotional instability, irregular child care. She attached a draft affidavit from our former babysitter, Tasha, claiming I had frightened Zora by punching a pantry door. I had never punched any door in my life. The paper shook once in my hand, not from rage, but from the awful feeling of reality sliding sideways. A marriage can fail. A campaign is something else entirely. I did not confront her that night. I helped Zora wash acrylic paint off her fingers from the paper city she had built. I ate dry pot roast at my mother's table and listened to her complain about the new dialysis technician who called everybody sweetie. I drove home through a cold drizzle with the wipers complaining across the windshield, and I sat in my truck outside my own house for 14 minutes because I knew that once I walked in, I would still have to act like a husband while privately accepting that I had been demoted to target. Shame is quiet work. It does not announce itself with broken glass. It sits beside you while you brush your teeth and asks how you missed it. I blame myself for liking peace too much, for staying grateful after marriage instead of observant, for admiring Alana's control as long as it helped us buy a house, get into right school district, and make people say we were a strong black couple doing things the right way. I blame myself for being the kind of man who took sincerity at face value. It felt childish suddenly, almost irresponsible. I took the draft petition to one person before I took it to any lawyer. My barber, Mr. Leon, on Mack Avenue. He had lined me up since I was 19 and had heard enough men's stories to fill a courthouse. I did not show him the papers. I just said, "How do you know if your wife is preparing to bury you with paperwork?" He stopped clipping for a second and looked at me in the mirror. "When the question stops sounding curious and starts sounding usable," he said, "do not yell. Start writing things down." I did exactly that. I wrote down everything. Dates I picked up Zora. Times Alana claimed conflicts that never existed. Every transfer from joint accounts. Every hotel charge billed to her firm retreat. Card on weekends. She was supposedly at legal conferences in Chicago. I pulled school sign-in records directly from the office. I requested attendance log from Zora's aftercare provider. I photographed the pantry door that had allegedly terrified our child, standing whole and white and unpunched under the kitchen light. I backed up home calendar entries to a cloud account only I controlled. It was boring work. That is why it saved me. The cheating part arrived almost as an insult, not a surprise. I found it in an expense report she accidentally forwarded to our home email while working late one Tuesday. Dinner for two at a hotel restaurant downtown. Spa charge. Valet. 2 breakfasts. The name attached to the reservation was Randall Pike, a senior partner at her firm, and the man mentoring her path to equity partnership. I sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of coffee gone cold and stared at those charges until dawn pushed gray light through the blinds. Betrayal has layers. That one humiliated me deepest. I still did not explode. I wanted to. I wanted to drive to her office, drop the printouts on Randall Pike's imported desk, and ask whether professional development usually came with room service. Instead, I thought about Zora, who still believed both her parents could be in the same room without weather changing. I thought about the judges Alana knew, the story she could tell if I gave her a raised voice, and one bad hallway scene. So I made a decision that cost me pride in the moment and returned power to me later. I chose restraint over performance. Through a deacon at church, I got the number of Denise Porter, a family law attorney in Detroit who had practiced long enough to sound unimpressed by everything except laziness. Denise met me at a diner near 8 Mile, slid her glasses down her nose, and read my notes without interrupting. The place smelled like coffee and fryer oil. Snow threatened outside but had not committed yet. After 20 minutes, she set the stack down and said, "Your wife is not just leaving. She is pre-building a record. Good news is she is sloppy in the way arrogant people often are." Denise told me not to steal, hack, or sneak. "We do not win by becoming criminals in a better shirt," she said. Everything had to be lawfully obtained, so we subpoenaed where we could. We preserved what came through shared accounts. We requested records from institutions that would release them to a parent or joint account holder. Denise hired a forensic accountant named Terrence Bell, a man with patient eyes and a notebook full of tabs that made mine look amateur. Terrence traced the missing savings into a consulting LLC controlled by Alana's sister, and, eventually, back toward Randall's orbit. The ugly miracle of paper is that it lacks pride. It will tell on whoever touched it. Terrence found that Alana had moved money from our joint savings, from Zora's education account, and from a home equity line into a series of transfers labeled as temporary family loans. None had my consent. 2 carried a digital authorization stamp suggesting my approval. I was at work when those supposed signatures happened, clocked in on a training log with 10 witnesses and a security badge entry. Somebody had not only lied, somebody had fabricated evidence and assumed my life was too busy to notice. Then Denise uncovered the part that changed the whole case. Alana had used her firm email to coach Tasha, our former sitter, on what phrases would read credibly in a custody affidavit. Concern for child's emotional safety was underlined in one email. Another instructed her to mention a hole in a wall that did not exist. There were drafts attached, revised with track changes. Denise printed them and handed them to me without ceremony. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is the difference between a painful divorce and sanctions. Keep your face still. She does not know we have this." After that, I started preparing the folder. I bought a fresh box of divider tabs from the office supply store and assembled it at my mother's dining table while she watched game shows with the volume too high. Section A, Financial Transfers and Forged Authorization Trail. Section B, School Aftercare and Pickup Records Contradicting Neglect Claims. Section C, Coach Witness Emails and Draft Affidavits. Section D, Expense Reports and Travel Records Contradicting her statements about conferences. Section E, a letter from Denise to Alana's managing partner outlining potential ethical violations if she continued to litigate fraudulently. The folder had weight. So did the truth. 3 days before I was served, Alana tried one last rehearsal over dinner. She had made salmon, which she only cooked when trying to soften a conversation, and kept smoothing the napkin in her lap. Zora was upstairs gluing tiny paper windows onto a shoebox library. Alana said, "Do you ever wonder whether we married because we were compatible or because we both like being admired together?" It was such an Alana sentence, polished enough to sound profound while quietly placing blame on a shared shelf. I said, "I think one of us married as a witness." She looked up fast. That Friday, a freezing rain tapped against the kitchen windows. Alana watched me clear plates and said, "You have become difficult to reach." I almost laughed. I almost said, "No, I have become careful." Instead, I said, "I have become tired." She nodded as though collecting a statement for later use. That was the night I knew she would file soon. She had the distant calm of a woman who believed the next move belonged entirely to her. I went to bed and slept on my back with my hands folded over my chest, like a man practicing stillness before impact. The service at work happened the following Tuesday, right after the noon huddle. Once the courier took the blue folder, the room stayed painfully quiet for a second. Reggie cleared his throat. Somebody dropped a socket wrench. Then the terminal noise restarted, because buses do not care about a man's marriage and schedules do not pause for humiliation. I put the divorce packet in my bag, initiated a brake inspection sheet, and told the crew to keep moving. That was not strength. It was survival by routine. My hands only started shaking when I got to the vending machine in the break room. Alana called 23 minutes later. I let it ring once more than I wanted to, then answered. Her voice was tight enough to cut fruit. "What did you send to my office?" I looked through the break room window at sleet-tracing silver lines on parked windshields. "The same thing you sent me," I said. "Paper that changes the afternoon." She took a breath. "Do not be theatrical." That made me smile despite myself. "You sent a process server to my job. Alana." She went quiet. Then, very softly, "Who have you shown this to?" "The people who needed facts." By 5 o'clock, Randall Pike had been pulled out of a deposition, and Alana had been asked not to enter any new filings in her own divorce matter pending internal review. Denise called me from her car. "They are scrambling," she said. "Good. Let them use their energy." I drove home through slush and found Zora at the kitchen table building a tiny grocery store out of cardboard. "Mama late again?" she asked. I said yes. She did not look surprised. Kids notice absences long before adults admit their patterns. I helped her make a cereal aisle from construction paper and swallowed my anger whole. The next morning, Alana came home dressed in yesterday's navy suit, her face scrubbed clean and somehow older. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom while I knotted my tie. "You involve my firm," she said. "No," I answered. "Your choices involve your firm." She flinched at that, barely, like a person hearing glass crack underfoot. "Marcus, people make mistakes in emotional situations." I looked at her through the mirror. A mistake is a cruel sentence. A campaign with forged authorizations, coached affidavits, and fake neglect claims is not a mistake. It is a strategy. She sat down hard on the chair. She tried the legal version of crying first. Not tears, but injured professionalism. You do not understand how ugly these cases get, she said. I was trying to protect Zora and stabilize the assets. I turned around then. From what? Me taking her to school on time? Me paying the mortgage? Me ironing uniforms while you spent weekends at the Westin with Randall Pike? Her face changed at his name, only for a second, but I saw it. That tiny collapse told me more than any confession could have. This is beneath you, she whispered. No, I said. What you did is... Temporary hearings came fast anyway, because the court calendar does not stop just because one side has embarrassed itself. Alana hired outside counsel, an older attorney from Oakland County, who looked irritated to inherit her mess. In the first hearing, Denise did almost nothing dramatic. She did not pound tables or give speeches. She simply handed up certified school records, bank statements, and email chain coaching Tasha's affidavit. The judge, a black woman with tired eyes and no patience for games, asked 3 questions in a row that landed like hammers. By the end of the morning, Alana's emergency custody request was withdrawn. Consequences do not arrive in a movie montage. They arrive as phone silence, canceled meetings, modified access to software, whispers outside conference rooms, and the sudden discovery that your usual confidence does not pay retainers. Alana moved into a furnished apartment near downtown because Denise advised me not to leave the marital home. Zora cried the first night her mother slept elsewhere. I sat beside her bed while the radiator clicked and hissed. "Did you make Mama leave?" she asked. It is one of the cruelest questions a child can ask because the answer is always bigger than the child deserves to carry. I told her the truth in the smallest safe shape. Your mother and I are having grown-up problems, and adults are trying to figure out the right way to solve them. She stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling. "Did anybody lie?" she asked. Children can smell the word, even when no one says it. I paused too long, and that was enough. Some people did not tell the truth the way they should have. I said. She pulled her blanket to her chin. I do not like that. Neither did I. But dislike is not the same as repair. Around that time, Tasha called me from a number I did not know. She was crying before she finished saying my name. She said Alana had told her the statements were just standard language, and that nobody would really use them to separate me from Zora. She said Randall had promised to help get her brother an interview at the firm's facilities vendor if she cooperated. I could have recorded the call secretly. I could have tried to corner her into a dramatic confession. Instead, I told her to call Denise directly and tell the truth once, cleanly and under affidavit. She did. My third decision point came with the bar complaint. Denise had enough to file one that week, and probably end Alana's career, or at least badly damage it. For 2 nights, I sat at the dining room table staring at the draft, while listening to the old house settle around me. I wanted consequences. I wanted the world to feel the mess she had made inside my home. But I also knew public professional destruction would harden everything, drag the case out, and turn Zora into a long-term spectator to warfare. So I chose a narrower path. We held the complaint in reserve and pushed settlement. Mediation took place in January in a plain office suite with bad coffee and fake plants. Outside, Detroit was all dirty snowbanks, exhaust, and the orange blink of salt trucks. Inside, we sat in separate rooms while lawyers moved paper between us like priests carrying offerings to feuding gods. Denise came in after the second round and said she is finally scared. Not because of the affair. Not even because of the forged financial trail. Because Randall's billing records had been subpoenaed and her firm now understood she had exposed them to reputational damage. Institutions often wake up late, but they do wake up. By then, the affair itself had already started rotting on her. Randall distanced himself fast, which told me all I needed to know about the grand love story she may have told herself was worth blowing up a family for. Men like that enjoy borrowed fire, not responsibility. Once the court entered an order preserving records and her managing partner started asking direct questions, he retreated into polished vagueness. Alana had gambled on being protected by power and elegance. What she learned too late was that power protects itself first. She was not exception. She was expendable in a silk blouse. During the 4th mediation session, Alana asked to speak to me without attorneys present. Denise hated it, But I agreed because sometimes you need to hear a person in their own unshielded voice. We sat in a small conference room with a window, facing a parking lot full of crusted snow. She looked thinner. Her usual polish cracked at the edges. You always made it seem simple, she said. Work, family, church, school forms, dinner. As if a life could just be built by showing up. I stared at her. That is exactly how a life gets built. She laughed once, bitterly. You do not understand what it is like, she said, to be the only black woman in rooms full of people who assume you're a decoration until you outperform them. That part, I understood more than she thought. But I also understood what she had done with that pressure. So you decided to become dangerous before anyone could dismiss you. I said. Her eyes filled then, finally, with something real. I was tired of being the one who bent. You did not stop bending, I said. You bent your ethics, your marriage, and your daughter's peace. She looked away first. We settled a week later. Joint legal custody. Primary residence with me during the school week. Equal holiday framework. The house sold in spring, and I bought a smaller brick place in Harper Woods with a fenced yard and a basement Zora immediately claimed for art projects. Alana repaid the diverted education funds under property agreement and took a reduced equity payout because the tracing was too ugly to fight. Denise kept the ethics package sealed but enforceable. The court order included language neither of us would have appreciated years earlier. Both parties shall refrain from manufacturing evidence or influencing witness testimony. Life after a legal war is not triumphant. It is administrative. New passwords, new routines, labels on medicine bottles, pickup calendars that suddenly matter in ordinary ways again. In the weeks Zora stayed with me more, I learned how much of parenting lives in repetition rather than speeches. Tuesday spaghetti, Thursday library trip, Saturday morning cinnamon rolls from a bakery near the avenue as she finished her reading log. We listened to old Tiger's broadcast while I fixed a leaky sink or ironed her school shirts. Little by little, the house stopped sounding like a courtroom after hours and started sounding like home. Alana did not vanish, because real life rarely grants that kind of clean ending. She moved to a smaller firm in Southfield after leaving the old one under language that was careful enough to preserve some dignity. She saw Zora regularly and, to her credit, became more consistent once the performance was over and the consequences turned solid. Sometimes she looked at me in exchanges like she wanted to say 10 different things and had chosen none. Once, during a spring soccer game, she quietly said, "You were right to keep records." I nodded. That was as close to an apology as we ever came. A year later, I found the blue folder on a shelf in my hall closet while looking for tax documents. The tabs were still crisp. My handwriting is still square and calm. I sat on the floor for a long time with that thing in my lap, thinking about how paper had held what people would not. Not love, not the truth, just proof. That mattered more than I ever wanted it to. Alana had tried to turn the law into scenery and me into the villain standing in it. The folder did not ruin her life. It ruined her version of mine. That was enough. If you stayed with the story to the end, then you already know this was never just about cheating. It was about control, lies, and the moment truth finally fought back. Like this video, share it with someone who loves intense relationship drama with satisfying twists, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories like this. What stays with me is not the moment the courier froze with that folder in his hand. It is the smaller moments that came before it. The fake school notes, the coached affidavit, the way my daughter asked, "Did anybody lie?" before any judge ever did. A lot of people think strength is a speech in the hallway or a dramatic reveal. Most of the time, it is quieter than that. It looks like documentation, restraint, and refusing to let humiliation make your decisions for you. The end.